Hello and welcome to the January version of Nonprofit Network. This is Park County Community Foundation's way of providing professional development and skill building opportunities for our local nonprofit community. Today is a big day for us because we launched our 2021 grant application. And in that spirit, we wanted to provide some training on the topic of grant readiness. So today we are going to be sharing information from the Dotted I fundraising group. The Dotted I is a grant writing and grant readiness organization that was founded by Brianna Polachek, who is a Park County native, Park High graduate, and also one of 3 Montana grant writers who are nationally accredited for their grant writing skills. So, Brianna, take it away. What do you have in store for us today?
Yeah, great. I'll just do some quick overview or introductions of Hannah and myself. I started out as a grant writer working in Livingston for Nittany Grant Works. And so that was in 2008. I had the opportunity to do grant writing for municipalities and tribal entities. So that was really fun to get to learn federal grants, state grants, all of the different types of ways that nonprofits and for-profits and municipalities could partner. And while I was working for the city, I actually had the opportunity to work with Michael McCormick. And if any of you know him, you know how inspiring he can be. And that was really when the light bulb went off in my head and I thought, I need to be grant writing for nonprofits. So I opened the doors to the Dotted I in 2014. And we have been writing grants for nonprofits for the last 6 years and really just love what we do. And so we really work to find and secure grant funding for nonprofits so that they can succeed. And we also offer a grant coaching training program where we help nonprofit leaders find success in writing grants on their own. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my partner, Hannah.
Hello guys, sorry, I touched something on my screen and the presentation went a little haywire, so hold tight on the technology issues that I'm having right now. But I will happily introduce myself. My name is Hannah, and I've worked with the Dotted I for a little over 3 years now. And like many of you, I'm sure, I wear a lot of hats at the company because we are a small team. But my main role is project management for our clients, which means I help clients develop their grant strategy, assess preparedness, conduct research, and actually write and submit grants on their behalf. Since working with the Dotted I, I've helped secure funding for nonprofits in a lot of different, across a lot of sectors, including STEM and environmental education, youth sports and community recreation, social justice, youth literacy, maternal mental health, and a lot more. I've also recently started training nonprofit leaders in our Mastering Grants training program. And that's been a lot of fun and a really fun addition to our services. And I love the work I do because it combines my passion for writing with my experience in education and human development and community health to bring a well-rounded perspective to your grant-seeking journey. I'm gonna hand it back over to Bree, but for the moment, I need to try to figure out what's going on with our slides.
Hannah, if you want, I can share my screen. My slides are up.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my computer right now.
Let's see if it'll let me grab them.
Don't you love technology, everybody?
It's inevitable.
Just when you need it to work.
Can you see mine?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's see if it'll let me present for you.
I know. I don't know why it wouldn't load. There you go.
Okay, perfect. So what to expect from our session? Today we have very limited time. We would love to spend so much more time with you. So we're going to try to give you as many key takeaways as we can from this session, but I do want to let you know that we offer free consultations, free 30-minute consultations where we're not trying to sell ourselves. We're actually just trying to help you, iron out some kinks or figure out some things within your organization. So if when we're done with this, please, contact us via email, schedule a call through the website, and we can kind of talk through anything if you have any questions. And we'll stick around for questions at the end as well. So we just want to give you an overview of the necessary documents that you need to have prepared before you even start writing a grant proposal. And you'll likely know about a lot of those, but sometimes we just like to touch base on how important they are, because you might need to revisit them before submitting a bigger grant like one to A&B West. The importance of having an organizational budget and a program budget. We'll talk about strategic documents that make your grant writing process easier, how to address your program readiness in 6 simple questions. And then if we have time, we'll have a little bit of implementation sessions in between. So here we're just talking about what does it mean to be grant ready. We really want to see that that you're organized, that you're prepared, you're coming across as strategic, that you have very clear programs and services that are easy to talk about, especially in a grant proposal, and that you have your needs prioritized, and that you have the capacity to implement your programs and services. So how do you know that you're grant ready? We've provided this grant readiness checklist, and this is only 2 of the pages. There's a couple more, and you should have gotten this either in the invite, or you can go to, I think, Barb, did you put it in the chat box where people can access that? It should be in there if you haven't got this.
I am adding that right now. There's a page on our website that has all of our resources from different nonprofit network presentations. And at the top of the list, you can download this document. So I just put that in the chat box.
Yeah, so
Thanks, Barb.
Thank you, Barb. So from a readiness standpoint, we just kind of want to look at assessing if you're ready to pursue grants in 2 categories. The organization infrastructure side of things, which is a little more based on what's on this checklist, and then the program project readiness. How ready is your program to share with funders? So when we look at this checklist, I've kind of broken and pulled out the pieces that are going to be really stand out and important, but we do suggest that you have all of these in place, preferably organized online in one folder that you can access anytime that you're applying for grants. So one of the very basic beginning things to even become a 501c3 nonprofit is making sure that you have a tax status letter, the date on that date that you will put in applications when they say, when was your organization founded? I have a lot of organizations that are like, well, we really started talking about it 7 years ago. And it's like, well, your letter is only dated 6 months ago. So in the eyes of a funder, you're 6 months old. Articles of incorporation and bylaws, those are required to become a 501c3. And then your list of board of directors. We have a ton of grant applicants, applications that ask for this document. And we suggest not only having the name and the role, but also a short paragraph that really highlights what skills that they bring to your organization and how it ties into you being a successful nonprofit. I'm talking really fast, sorry. Readiness continued. So these types of documents, I do suggest that nonprofits operate more like a for-profit. I feel like being able to show that you have some sort of a savings plan, how you will be sustainable, how you will continue to fund what you do without grant funds is extremely important. And so developing these documents not only is very beneficial for funders to see, but it also truly helps you have a nonprofit that is going to be successful. So we suggest having a strategic plan in place. And if you do have one in place, but it's been a few years or you haven't looked at it since COVID hit, we definitely suggest going back and reassessing if you have plan A and plan B lined out in that. A logic model, which is so important to have when you're sussing out how your program is going to actually happen. A timeline, a lot of funders really want to see when it's going to be implemented, how long it's going to take, how long it'll take before they see any sort of results. So your evaluation plan comes into play there. How are you actually going to show that the funding they've given you is actually making a difference, right? How are you going to do a pre-survey and a post-survey? Are you going to look at data from before and then again after? Just being able to discuss those things in your application shows a readiness level beyond others who don't have it. And then there are the financial piece. A lot of organizations, funding organizations, are going to ask for the last 2 years of your 990s. That's not to say that there won't be some out there for startups that don't need a 990 yet, but if you do have them, just keeping those in a nice safe space. Recent profit and loss statements and balance sheets, always updating those at least every quarter and putting those in that same shared folder will be a really important thing to do. And then the organizational budget. I have some people ask me why they would need an organizational budget and a program budget. Why couldn't they just turn in an organizational budget? And the difference is some funders won't fund your general operating or your core mission support, and they'll only fund specific parts of your programming. So generally your organizational budget will just have one line item for the total of what your program is. Whereas your program budget should have all of the details, your income and expenses, on what it takes to implement that program. So if you can show funders, here's our organizational budget, here's how we operate on a whole and make an impact in all of the areas we make an impact, but we're really asking you for funding for this program, and here's how we've sussed out all the details for this program, and we're asking you for this specific part because we see that's what you fund. They're going to know that you have taken the time to make sure that you know what you need and how you can put their money to its best use. So we help our clients really make sure that you have funder-friendly organizational budget and program budget. I tell people any funder should be able to pick up your budgets and not even have to read anything, that it paints this clear picture of what you do. And one of the opportunities to add words to your numbers is a budget narrative, which is just a document where you take every line item from your budget and you justify it in words. Our salary, okay, the total is $200,000. Is that one person? Is that 3 people? And then you write that out for each line. This is 3 people at $75 an hour, $25 an hour, whatever it is. And if you can't look at your budget and write out in words what it is, you may need to go back to the drawing board and make sure that you fully understand what it's taking to run your programs in your organization. And then that will show through to the funders that you approach, that you're grant ready. You have really a well thought out program. Those 3 are my favorite things, the budgets. So if you do have questions about yours, please do reach out. So with that, that was all the stuff. It was super fast, I know, but I know that there are a lot of things that people already know about that, and we wanted to leave enough time for Hannah to really kind of dive into the program development piece.
Brianna, before we transition, can I share a brief question from the chat line?
Of course.
You mentioned the value of having a logic model and an evaluation plan. And we had a question as to whether that might be something, whether you had a template of those things that you could share.
Yeah, I don't know that we have one offhand that we can put in the chat box, but we could definitely get in touch with you after the presentation and see if we can provide you with an example or a template.
Yeah, I have a couple of places that we kind of go to for a good example. So we'd be happy to share. If you just email us, we could definitely send that over.
Okay, and I can also load that on our website. Okay, thank you so much. And now, Hannah.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. So the reason we kind of went through that quickly is you have the checklist in your hand, and that really is a lot of information to go through individually, line by line. And we are confident that you all can do that on your own. And of course, if you have questions when you're reading through that, please reach out to us. But in terms of organizational readiness, right, there are those things that you need to kind of take care of, the documents you need to have in place. Pardon my dog for making sounds in the background. Those are, important documents that you need to have in place. You need to have a handle on your financial need. That's a lot of the infrastructure that you have to develop before, you're ready to receive funding. What I'm going to talk about is really assessing whether your program is ready, because just because you may have all these documents prepared and in an organized online file doesn't mean that just because you've checked off all those boxes that your program is ready to present to a funder. There's still some things you need to consider. Being well organized and having all of those documents in place is only half the battle. So you have to be able to create a persuasive and compelling argument as to why your program deserves funding above the other applicants, right? Now, this is to say, there are a lot of nuances that come with program design, and unfortunately, we just don't have the time to go in depth on the art and science of program design and program planning. They have courses in college for this. There's a lot to it. What we'll be discussing today is a very simplified version of program design and how to assess your readiness. So what we'll be addressing your program readiness through the lens of what a funder expects you to be able to communicate to them through your narrative. So we're kind of looking at this lens of, if you have to answer these questions in a narrative form, you need to know them before you even go to write the grant, right? You need to know those answers. So for a simple readiness assessment of your program, consider these 6 questions that you should be able to answer. Who are you serving? What are you doing? When is it taking place? Where is it taking place? Why is this program important? And how will you know you've made an impact? If you can't answer these fundamental questions prior to submitting your application and writing that narrative, you may not be ready to write a compelling and persuasive argument for funding. And that's okay. That just means you have the opportunity to go back to the drawing board and do some additional planning. Bree, if you could move to the next slide, that would be awesome. So because of our limited time today, I'm going to go through the who, what, when, where, and how sections fairly quickly, because we really wanted to be able to dig in around one of these readiness questions, and we think going over the why section more in depth will be a great starting point for those of you who are just getting started on your grant writing journey, and for those of you who have more experience but could use the refresher. So let's go ahead and dive in. The who are you serving? So in order to be prepared to seek funding for your program, you need to know who you're serving. So for your program to be ready, you should be able to provide a description of the community, provide participant demographics to varying degrees. We know sometimes it's hard to collect that depending on who you're serving. So there is some variance there. And not only know who you're serving, but how many, so that you're able to provide both quantitative and qualitative data to the funder. So remember, if your priorities align, right, with a foundation, they care about the same community that you're serving, the same population. So this is an opportunity for you to really paint them a picture of who it is that you would both be helping. And in order to be really ready, you should have that context of your community, know those participant demographics, whether it's age, sex, or gender. Maybe it's poverty level or income level, race or ethnic background, really digging into some of those participant demographics and knowing the community you're serving. If Livingston is the community that you're serving as a whole, give the context. What is it like to live in Livingston? What is the poverty level? What is it, rural, suburban, urban? Be able to kind of paint that picture and give context to not only the community as a whole that you're serving, but also the individuals that you're serving. And that will really serve you well, especially if you can say, this is who we're serving and this is how many. It's going to add support to your argument because it's going to be really well thought out and the funders will see that impact through those numbers. So next is the what. What are you doing? So this seems really easy, right? The activities that you're doing. What are the deliverables? This is where the funder can really see if your program isn't quite ready. So to be ready for funding, right? To be ready, really considered ready to apply for a grant, you should have a clear and thoughtful plan of what activities or services will be implemented during the duration of your program. So those are your deliverables, right? What are you actually going to be doing? So this might look like in a narrative form, an overview or summary of the services or the program that you're providing, and also a detailed description of your scope of work. What's going to happen during this program, right? What are you expected to do? What is it that's going to, move your program along? And I just want to give a reminder too. We've seen a lot of nonprofits lately kind of afraid, I shouldn't say afraid, but just hesitant to really commit to this question because obviously COVID-19 has presented so many challenges for planning purposes, right? What we want to remind you is that you aren't married to your program plan or your activity plan. It's okay to change over time because of unforeseen circumstances like a global pandemic, or something as simple as, we didn't have as many people register for our after school program that we anticipated, so our activities changed. Funders want to see that you have a planned scope of work, but it's a working relationship that you have with the funder. If something changes within that plan, it's okay to communicate that to them. Don't be afraid to make a plan and make projections about what to anticipate during your program. Make that plan with confidence and just know you can always change it if you have to and communicate with the funder. But you should still map out those deliverables. All right, Bree, next slide. All right, so now we're going to be talking about when. Right? The when is it taking place? So now we're talking about a time. So this might look like to some of you an actual start and end date, if it's maybe a project or if it has specific start times and end times. But this is really trying to get to know the duration of your program, and you should know this and be prepared to answer this prior to writing a grant proposal. So this may look different for everyone, right? It could be that your program runs all year long. Maybe your program is offered in sessions, or perhaps it aligns with the school year. Maybe it's offered seasonally. Whatever it is, you need to be able to know when your program is being offered. And remember that it can be flexible. But the reason you need to know not only the activities that you have planned as well as the timeline or duration of when it's going to take place is because you should be able to have a definitive timeline of events and major milestones that you'd like to accomplish throughout the life of your program. This area, having a timeline and major milestones to reach, is an area we often hear funders say is underdeveloped in grant applications from nonprofits. I think oftentimes we get caught up in more of the what we're doing, maybe how we're doing it, that we forget that it's important to say, this is what we want to accomplish during the course of our program, because it helps keep you accountable to meeting those outcomes, and it shows your funder that you are keeping track so that you're prepared to meet those outcomes, right? And report back to them at the end of the grant. So take the time before you start applying for grant funding to thoughtfully develop your activity plan and the milestones you want to achieve so that you do stay on track to meet those outcomes. And you can say, we met X, Y, and Z milestones, and it will be really impressive that you've kept track to a funder. Okay, now we're going to talk about where. Where is it taking place? So this one is pretty self-explanatory. This is the geographic location or locations that your program will take place. But think about, if your program is operating in Livingston alone, or maybe it's in Bozeman, does it have satellite locations in additional cities? Maybe your program travels to different parts of the state or country, maybe even internationally. Wherever your program is taking place, it's important to have this information planned out prior to submitting a grant proposal. This is a key piece of your readiness. And the reason it's important to have a plan is because they want to know, again, it ties back into that community. They want to know where they're serving, because it's going to align with their priorities. And what I want to say on this too is, even if you're in the planning phase or the expansion phase of your program, and you're not quite sure where the next location might be, or you're still trying to figure it out, I would always recommend saying those planned or projected places rather than just saying to a funder, we don't know yet, we haven't identified it yet. Because again, it's okay if your plan changes, that they just want to see that you've thought through and have a plan A, a plan B, or maybe a plan C, right? So that could be with your location as well, because it sounds a lot stronger if you can say, we anticipate offering our program in Bozeman, Belgrade, and Livingston, as opposed to, we don't know where our program will take place yet. It still has the same meaning, right? We anticipate our program to take place here. Doesn't mean that it will actually happen, depending on how it all shakes out, right? But it comes off a lot stronger to a funder that you've done the homework, you've thought about where your program is going to be offered, and you can say, these are our options. Within that proposal, it may look different over time. It's okay to be honest. So that's where you should really look at being prepared and knowing where your program is taking place. And then the last one we'll talk about before we really dive into the kind of why question is how. How will you know you've made an impact? So planning your intended outcomes and how you will evaluate your success is important, not just for grant funding, but for your organizational success as well, because whether it be grant funders, corporate sponsors, individual donors, volunteers, or your community as a whole, they're going to want to know what kind of impact you're making. And you don't want to just pull numbers out of thin air or just say, well, we're helping with suicide prevention, without being able to tell them, well, how are you helping with suicide prevention? What data do you have to back it up that you're making a difference, right? It's great that you are, but taking it that one step further and being able to show exactly how is really going to make your organization that much stronger and more successful in other fundraising efforts, as well as in grant funding. And this might look like a number of things for maybe documents or attachments that will kind of support this how question. So in your narrative, this might look like clearly articulated goals and objectives or outcomes that you just state. This is what we anticipate our outcomes to be, right? This is what we want to achieve through this program. So that may look like a theory of change. And a theory of change does not have to be it's not some some difficult, map or anything. A theory of change is just really that. It's your theory. What is the relationship between the activities in your program and the outcomes that you anticipate your program having? What's that relationship? What's the cause and effect? Knowing that theory, right, that theory of change, that causal relationship is really important to understand, not only because it explains why your program might be successful, but then if you have these clear outcomes in your evaluation plan, it'll be much easier to say, this is the relationship between our activity and our outcomes. This is what we hope will be a result of the program. And then in your evaluation plan, you can set yourself up with metrics or measurements of how you're going to see if you're actually reaching those outcomes. And that's where looking at, like Bree had mentioned before, pre and post surveys, it could be a metric could be as simple as attendance. We had 100% attendance throughout our after school program. And, that what was the output of that? What was the outcome? Because, of attendance, we had everyone really invested in learning. And it could be as simple as, looking at numbers, whether it's attendance or how many people attended a training. metrics don't have to be always, a survey. I think it's really helpful to have that anecdotal information where you can pull out themes, you can pull out quotes, but having other measurements that are quantitative in terms of numbers or percentages of, whether it's behavior change, things like that is also really important to have. And all of those things will help support this question of how are you making an impact? Not just what you're doing to make an impact, but how do you know you're actually doing it? And that might also look like a sustainability plan too, right? How do you plan to replicate this over time? What resources do you need? So these 5 questions are all extremely important in determining if you're ready to pursue grants for your organization and your programs. And remember, keep in mind, this is a very simplified, quick assessment that we're showing you. And these quick questions should not be your only marker in determining grant readiness or effective program design. Not by any means. You have to take, stakeholder information into account, your community need, whether you have the capacity to run programs. Again, making sure you have all those documents, whether it's infrastructure related or program related in place. So just know that these questions are definitely not the end all be all. There will be other questions that you need to answer in your applications. However, if you can't answer these fundamental questions with clarity and conviction, you might need to take a step back and do some more planning before approaching grant funders. So this is kind of a quick litmus test of, can I answer all 6 of these questions? If you say no, then you might need to wait and develop some answers more further, do some more planning before pursuing funding. If you can, you're off to a really great start. All right, Bree. So let's talk about this other question that we haven't covered yet. Your why. Why is this program important? So at the heart of this question, you are addressing your need statement. And that's what we're going to talk about today to kind of take some action steps in actually preparing you for some grant writing. So what we want to talk about with why your program is important and really looking at your need statement, this can be broken down in kind of 2 different ways, and both will play a part in your grant applications. We're only going to talk about one today, but it can be broken down into 2 different needs, right? Your organizational need and your community need. So your organizational need is the resources required to run your organization and your program. So this is going to be your program or your funding request, right? What resources, what funding do you actually need? This is where having a program budget, like Bree mentioned, is so important because in a grant request, you will need to communicate this request and support your request to the funder, and your budget will show where the gaps in your funding are, or if you don't have gaps, right? Maybe you don't operate at a deficit. It'll show your planned growth. What projections are you showing? Where's the opportunity for expansion, or maybe where there are gaps, right? We don't have enough resources to cover this. Your budget is going to show those gaps in funding and support your request. So while this is important to also consider in your preparedness of knowing your organization's need, knowing your funding priorities, this statement, right, this funding request also alludes to that greater need of, well, we need these resources. Why do we even need these resources? Because we have this program that's meeting a community need, right? So based on your community need, it'll kind of help influence your organization's need. But your community has a need or a problem and you're providing the solution, and that's why you need funding, right? But we could get totally in the weeds about talking, about assessing and being strategic around your fundraising priorities, especially with grant funding. But that is not what we're going to talk about today. I think the really important piece is addressing that community needs statement. And that's what we're going to kind of dive into. So one of the most compelling pieces of information you need to convey to a funder is why you do the work that you do. Why does your organization exist? you exist because you're filling an identified need in your community and a need that they want to support and help you solve. And this is your opportunity to share the need you're addressing and why you're the right organization to do it in collaboration with them. So now you may feel varying needs across your programs, which supports the overall mission and purpose of your organization. So determining your why or this need statement could look different for your organization as a whole versus the different programs you offer. So for this section, let's look at writing a need statement and describing your why with one specific program in mind. Okay, so we're going to do some writing, a little writing activity coming up. Don't worry, we're not going to necessarily share it with each other. If you don't want to, we're happy to hear anyone who is willing to share some of these pieces. But at the very heart of this, we just want you to have a leg up in getting yourself prepared to answer this question effectively. So let's dive in. Let's go to the next slide, Bree. All right, so actually crafting your need statement. So your need statement answers the question, what is the need your organization is addressing, and identifies the importance and urgency of the problem you're trying to solve. And while your need statement at the very base is just kind of describing the problem and what your need is, it can really be broken down into these 4 components that you should be able to address. The description of the problem. So what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Just a basic description. Recognition of the problem. So that's your why. What is it? Recognition is why this is a problem. Implications if the problem isn't solved. So what will happen to your community or your target population if this need goes unmet? If you don't offer this program and this need isn't solved, what happens to that community? And then this is a really great one to answer, why your organization is the one to solve it. So by addressing these core concepts of your need statement separately, we're thoughtfully building your case for support. And by thinking through each component really thoughtfully, you'll present a clear and concise need statement that wows funders. And doing this before you even think about applying for a grant will definitely put you ahead of the curve and save you so much time and energy. So let's talk about this activity. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Bree. What we're going to do is workshop this question a little bit together. And it's not going to be super intensive, just to kind of get some ideas out on paper. So we're going to go section by section and give you some time to jot those ideas down. This may be new for some of you who are new to grant writing. If you're experienced, this is a great opportunity to build on what you've already created. So we often see organizations answer those first 2 questions, the what is the problem and why is it a problem? But based on feedback we've heard from funders, we feel organizations are really missing out on an opportunity to address that question from all angles and strengthen their applications. With really talking about the implication if it's not solved and why your organization is the best one for the job. So that's what we're going to help you kind of work through a little bit today. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Bree. Okay, so the description of the problem, right? That is what is the problem you're trying to solve? This is pretty simple. What we'd like you to do is just take a minute to write down, maybe it's just a few words, bullet points, maybe it's 1-2 sentences, to just plainly describe what the problem is. Don't worry about adding a lot of details or the why or anything yet. Just go ahead and take a few minutes to write a clear description of the problem you're addressing. And we'll be here if you do have a question or something, you can kind of chime in or put it in the chat box. All right, go ahead and just kind of finish jotting down any words or finishing up that sentence that you're working on about what the problem is that you're trying to solve. This is just a great starting point, so feel free to come back to this this activity at a later time if you want, but we just want to get those juices flowing and see if we can get you one step closer to being grant ready. So next is recognition of the problem. So now that we've described the problem, we have to elaborate and explain why this is a problem. So this is where you want to back up your claim with supporting data, which might look like national data, local statistics, or metrics your organization has measured over time. It could be community input on their needs, key themes, or anecdotal evidence to connect your reader to the problem with a story. And really kind of paint that picture through the supporting data. So we're going to have you go ahead and try to talk about that why. Why is this a problem? We know that you may not have these kind of statistics and supporting data at the top of your head. Some of you might, which is great. But it's okay if you can't. Just think about, why is this the problem on a basic level, and maybe just list out what kind of data you might look for or you might provide to really back up this claim. So go ahead and take a minute just to kind of jot some of that down. Like I had mentioned, this is something that funders have said that this is kind of where organizations might stop. So these next two questions is where we'll really try to think about how do we take this statement even further and provide more information for funders and really show that you've clearly thought about the need of your community very thoroughly. All right, again, go ahead and wrap up any of those thoughts, jot down those words or any last minute sentences you need to finish up. If anyone wants to share theirs in the chat box, feel free to copy and paste. If you're writing on a computer, or just type it in if you'd like to share what you're working on. If not, that's okay. We hope this is just getting you started. The next thing you really want to address in your needs statement, or at least be able to articulate in a grant narrative, is the implications if the problem isn't solved. So what will happen to your community if this need goes unmet? This section really speaks to the importance and urgency of meeting this need. So why is it important to do now? A lot of people probably can really relate to this question or have information that maybe is related to COVID, right? What happens if we don't meet these needs, especially with COVID challenges lingering, why is this urgent? So go ahead and take just a minute to really think about what happens if this program doesn't exist or if this need goes unmet. What happens to your community and your population? All right, go ahead, give yourself a few more seconds to kind of wrap up your thoughts. I know this is a really big question, and I could probably sit and write about this kind of stuff for hours, especially when it comes to the implications of the people that you're serving, right? So come back to this if you still need more time. You know, this is a great activity to do before you actually write any grants. The last question we think is a really big opportunity for you to showcase your readiness and really set yourself above other applicants is why your organization is the one to solve this need. What makes you the best organization to solve the problem? What makes your organization qualified to solve this need? Do you have a personal connection or experience to the problem that you can tell through a story? Have you developed an innovative framework or program model that looks at solving this issue in a new way? Or maybe you've modeled your program off of a well-established program design with years of research and success to back it up. To answer this question, think about why your organization is the right fit for the job and how you're going to back this statement up. So what makes you unique? What are you doing in a new way? What partnerships do you have? What experience do you have? What resources can you offer? Why is your organization the one to solve this? For those of you who are submitting an application to Park County Community Foundation as well as AMB West, this is a really great question to try to develop. I know AMB West is really looking at why your organization should be the one to present these programs, or what kind of collaborations you've created to present the best solutions to these community needs. And this is often overlooked. We kind of, you know, forget to answer this question a lot because we're worried about some of those other components. So take a few more seconds to really think about why your organization should be the one addressing this need. Take a few more seconds to kind of wrap up any thoughts you have. Jot down those last minute notes. Okay. So we know this was a very quick presentation on assessing grant readiness, both organizationally and kind of from a program readiness standpoint. But what we really wanted to try to do was just get you thinking about all of the documents you need to have in place prior to submitting grant proposals, and really thinking through the lens of communication, right, for your program readiness. What are you going to have to communicate to a funder? And really look through that lens of how you're going to answer their narrative. And that's why we wanted to do this activity, to really get you, provide some action steps to start addressing this question, especially the why this program is important. If you take away anything, that's one of the most important things. You know, addressing your need statement is one of the most important things you can talk about in an application, and it's really going to support and strengthen your organization and your proposal if you can clearly talk about your need and why your program is so important. So again, if you have questions, please feel free to follow up with us. We do have different ways for you to work with us. If you do have some lingering questions, you know, this was kind of a big picture. This is a lot to talk about. So this was kind of, you know, bigger picture. We could talk about grant readiness for hours. So if you feel so inclined, you have questions about the readiness pieces or how you can be more prepared as an organization, give us a call. It's free 30 minutes to just pick our brain, chat about your problem or your organization, the problems maybe you have with grant writing. problems you have, that you just are stuck around, and you might need some expert brain power to help get unstuck. So we do offer those free 30-minute calls to just learn more about your organization and your needs. If you are looking for more capacity and more support than just kind of talking things through, we do offer a couple of different services. We have a grant readiness package and a grant research package. So our readiness package allows nonprofits to really assess their readiness. Kind of what we did today, we take a look at all of the documents you have in place, what you do or don't have, and then going one step further than that, we really assess the strength of those documents to see how we can tweak them to be stronger or implement new documents to really put your best foot forward and try to really suss out some of those program questions so that you're prepared when you go to write grants, you're prepared to answer those. And then our grant research is pretty self-explanatory. If you need help prospecting and finding those opportunities because maybe you just don't have the time to do it, we're all busy, or maybe you don't know where to look for grants and you feel a little overwhelmed by that process, we offer this research package for you for both of those options. If you just want some help, some capacity to really comb through databases, we provide you with a curated list of opportunities that would be a good fit for your organization. And then we offer monthly writing services, and that kind of includes everything. When we have contracted clients for our monthly services, it includes the readiness, the research, and the writing and submission, and even management if awards are received. So that's kind of the one-stop shop for all of your grant needs if you need more than just readiness or research. And then this may be really great for some of you newer to grant writing or wanting to boost your skills and your confidence. We started a Mastering Grants training program where we will coach you through the art of grantsmanship. We look at readiness, we assess, we teach you how to find opportunities. We talk about writing, how to improve the writing you may have already done, what funders really want to see. And we also kind of talk about management and relationship building with funders. So space is limited. If you are interested in learning more about our grant training and going through that process with us, please feel free to reach out. It's a great option if you really want to improve your grant writing skills and just need some coaching to get you to the next step. So I think that's it from us. Thank you, Barb, so much for inviting us to present on this topic. We could talk about readiness and all things grants for days and days. So if anyone does have any questions, we will open the floor. I know we don't have a ton of time left, but if anyone does have any last minute questions, feel free to speak up or send us an email with your questions, book a call.